The moment Tyrell announced he would no longer pursue Banneker, the air in the Richardson house seemed to shatter. Martin's carefully constructed world, built on years of sacrifice, late-night applications, and whispered prayers to secure his son's future, began to crumble in an instant. Every expectation, every hope, every ounce of authority he had wielded hung by a thread as Tyrell's choice, love over legacy, hit him like a physical blow. The house, once a sanctuary of ambition and control, now vibrated with tension, a storm gathering silently yet palpably. Smitty's loyalty wavered, Samantha's protective instincts flared, and Tyrell, caught between desire and duty, prepared to defy them all. In that single moment, the calm facade of Fairmont Crest fractured, unleashing a torrent of anger, betrayal, and power struggles that no one could contain. Tyrell's decision landed like a bombshell: he would not go to Banneker. His father, Martin, who had stayed up countless nights filling out applications, calling academic advisors, arranging interviews, and praying that his son would follow in his footsteps, felt the full force of betrayal. Tyrell was abandoning not just a college, he was turning away from the legacy that Martin had painstakingly built. And the reason struck Martin like salt in a wound: Jessica. Her voice, her expectations, her family's tradition. Tyrell was choosing her over everything Martin thought mattered. In Martin's mind, every sacrifice he had made to open the path to Banneker was now rendered meaningless. The countless evenings of tense phone calls with Isaiah, the academic counselor they both trusted, meant nothing if his son was willing to throw away the opportunity simply to please a girl. He had pictured Tyrell walking across that campus, confident, respected, ambitious, not grasping for love halfway across the country. The betrayal consumed him. The more he replayed the moments, the more he realized that his dreams for Tyrell had never truly been Tyrell's dreams. Deep inside, Martin's anger twisted with a deeper fear, the kind that gnawed at him in quiet hours. He saw himself in his son, a younger man forced by his own family's expectations, struggling to define his worth. If Tyrell succeeded, it proved that Martin's sacrifices had value. But if Tyrell walked away for love, he felt that was the weight of failure reflected in his son's mirror. He feared that everyone would see that the life he painstakingly molded could be so easily discarded. The shame, the whisper of his own shortcomings, cut him as sharply as any insult. Smitty watched the situation unfold with mounting unease. He had helped Martin all along, believing in the same dream, Tyrell at Banneker, succeeding in the way Martin never had. But as Tyrell broke down in tears, confessing his fear of losing Jessica, Smitty realized that the dream he and Martin had built might not be his son's. The tears were not about fear of rejection from university, they were about heartbreak, about being torn between two worlds. Samantha, Tyrell's sister, felt a surge of protective fury. She saw in her brother a younger version of herself, eager to please, quick to deny who he truly was for fear of losing what he cherished. She sensed the manipulation, the emotional pressure that had quietly seeped into Tyrell's life. She knew too well what it meant to live under the crushing weight of expectation. But when Martin laid down the law, threatening to cut off financial support and even strip Tyrell of the Richardson name if he went to UCLA, Samantha felt her blood boil. That name meant heritage, status, a certain power in Fairmont Crest. But at what cost? The house turned cold. The weekends felt hollower. Martin walked through the halls as if pacing the boundaries of a crumbling empire. He rehearsed his lines, brooding on ultimatums and punishments, plotting ways to force Tyrell back in line. He believed that the worst form of failure would be letting his son throw everything away for a high school romance. He was rigid as steel, unyielding, convinced that love was a distraction, an indulgence, not a foundation for one's future. Smitty, on the other hand, found himself torn in two directions. His loyalty to Martin wavered as he witnessed his son's heartbreak, the raw vulnerability in Tyrell's eyes. He had grown up under domineering parents, he'd promised himself he wouldn't repeat their mistakes. And yet here he was, standing next to Martin, armed with the same threats. The tension within him grew, churning like a tide ready to crash. Tyrell, isolated and anguished, retreated into secret plans. He drafted letters he knew no one would read. Letters of defiance, of regret, of absolution. He applied to both Banneker and UCLA, but no one knew that he had also written a deferment letter, beneath his calm exterior, a silent rebellion.
He could not reconcile functioning as the dutiful son his family demanded, yet abandoning his own heart.
He feared losing Jessica, but he feared more losing everything he had worked for, and even more, losing himself in a lie. The day came when he submitted that deferment letter, tore it open one final time to read his words as though whispering a secret to himself, then signed and sent it. It felt like stepping off a cliff. He imagined his family's reactions, Martin's rage, Samantha's disappointment, or worse, silence, and Smitty's torn face. But he knew he had to choose. A year of work, of distance, of proving his worth to himself, that was his plan. He could not be bound by someone else's narrative any longer. But Samantha discovered it. She found a pen-stained envelope hidden in his room, its seal already broken. Her breath caught, her heart froze. She realized the magnitude of his decision, and she understood immediately, revealing this to Martin would shatter him. Not just her brother, but the entire delicate structure of their home. But staying silent, that, too, carried a weight. To protect him was to betray her father, to betray him was unthinkable. Samantha stared at the decision she had to make: preserve Tyrell's secret so he could walk his own path, or expose it and trigger a confrontation that might destroy them all. She felt the sting of her father's fury even before he knew, the thunder in her chest, her fingers trembling. If she defended Tyrell, she risked her own standing in her family, opening old wounds about control, authority, and the brutal cost of expectations. If she kept quiet, she carried the burden of deception, complicit in his rebellion. In the quiet of that night, the family dynamic shifted. Martin paced alone in his study, muttering to the walls. Smitty lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying years of his own childhood chains. Samantha sat by Tyrell's empty room, holding the envelope in her hands, tears threatening to fall for the first time in years. Somewhere, Tyrell packed his few belongings, each one a symbol of defiance and hope, bracing himself for a world outside the gates of Fairmont Crest, a world that had felt too small for his dreams. The stakes had never been higher. For Martin, this was more than a son's choice, it was a test of control, legacy, and his own self-worth. For Tyrell, it was an existential moment: was he the son his family wanted, or the man he longed to be? For Samantha, it was a crossroads. Obey the unspoken rules or stand by her brother and embrace the chaos that might follow. And for Smitty, it was perhaps the hardest lesson of all, that love and ambition do not always align, and that sometimes the hardest legacy to break is the one we inherit from our own parents. In the silence that followed, their home felt empty, as though a vacuum had formed in the heart of their relationships. The confrontation had not happened yet, but the threat of it loomed, a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Every glance, every half-spoken word carried the weight of what might come: confession, fury, reconciliation, or irreparable fracture. Tyrell would leave, tasked with proving himself on his own terms. But once he stepped outside, there was no sure return. The decisions he had made would define what he truly valued: love, legacy, or freedom. And whatever came next, nobody could remain unchanged. Beneath the Richardson estate's tense silence, Tyrell's defiance had shattered the family's fragile equilibrium. Martin seethed with a mix of anger and fear, seeing his sacrifices and the family legacy dismissed for a high school romance, while Smitty wrestled with guilt over repeating the same patterns of control he once despised. Samantha, holding Tyrell's secret deferment letter, faced a painful choice. Reveal it and risk shattering the family, or stay silent and protect him at her own moral cost. Tyrell, quietly packing his belongings, embraced a dangerous freedom, stepping toward an uncertain world beyond Fairmont Crest. As night deepened, the house simmered with anticipation, every heartbeat a countdown to confrontation, every shadow a reminder of the choices and consequences looming. Who would bend, who would break, and who would rise? The answers remained unknown, leaving the family and viewers on the edge of a storm that promised revelation, upheaval, and the transformative power of choice. Thank you all for your loyal support and listening.